Twin leading shoe brakes, probably the most hotly discussed subject on every Land Rover forum. I put a brand new brake master cylinder into this Land Rover Series 3 and I put new slave cylinders into the wheels. Come to bleed the system, no joy. So today, using blind optimism and all these tools that I have in my armoury, together with all the helpful comments that we put in at the end of the last video, so I'm going to try and get these brakes bled. I'm then going to dissect the system and try and find where are the places that this air keeps getting trapped and see if we can rectify that situation. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So we put our new wheel cylinders on, put our brake shoes back in. Next thing we do is loosen the snail shells so that the brake shoes are at their lowest level. What I've also done is I've put the little marks here onto the wing, so I know to tighten the top one I go that way, and to tighten the bottom one I go that way. That helps me out later. So we'll pop the hub back on, do the same thing on the other side. Right, so I've fitted my lovely shiny new brake master cylinder to here. I've filled it right to the very top with brake fluid. Leave the top off. Next, gently press the brake pedal until you start to feel some pressure. This will prime the master cylinder here. And if you've got the safety valve system on your brakes, then don't press the pedal any more than 3/4 of the way down. When you've got some tension there and you can feel the pressure in the pedal, then check the level in your reservoir, and if it needs some, top it up. Now, as a general rule of thumb, when you're bleeding your brakes, you start with the hub that is the furthest away from the master cylinder and work your way closer. Now, I've already done the back ones, so I'm now at the passenger side on the front. So here's the first and simplest method. Attach a piece of tube to the bleed nipple, bring it down to a jug or something, and then put some brake fluid in the bottom of that. So as you press the pedal, push the air out. When you stop, it can't suck air back in because the end of the tube is sat in the brake fluid, and so that's all it can do is pull that back up. That's the first and simplest. The second method, which I'm going to try here now, is to put a screw into the end of the tube, and that should allow the brake fluid to come out, but it won't let any air get sucked back in. Let's have a go at that. Now then, I'd say that any one of those methods would work perfectly on a normal system, but what we've got here is the twin leading shoe brake system, and it's a bit more difficult. So what I want to do now is try and narrow down the problem by isolating off part of the system. So I'm going to use hose clamps and put one on the rubber flexi hose at the back, which will isolate the back wheels. I'll put another one on the driver's side, and that will isolate that particular hub. And so now in the system we've got either the master cylinder, this wheel here, or the safety valve. So let's try that. So what we've got here is a hose clamp. So you put your hose into there, close it down, and then you use this little slider and that locks it tight onto the hose. Just like that. And here we are at the back. Now I've got one more thing to try before I move on from the tube type system, which this tube system is perfectly good for bleeding any sort of normal brakes, not these things. So I bought this one at Halfords for £2.55. There it is, it's a modern system. So this is a non-return valve here. There's this end, this part here, you use that to jam that down onto the bleed nipple to hold the hose on. This is a non-return valve. You can see there's a ball bearing in there. And in fact, many years ago, what I used to use was simply a piece of tube like this with a ball bearing shoved up inside it. And that would allow the fluid to come past, but the air couldn't come back in. And that worked perfectly well. But let's have a go at this one. Okay, so make of that what you will. There's a bit of fluid gone missing here, but not a lot. It's probably the equivalent to the amount of fluid that has come out the other end. It doesn't seem to me like I've got any of the air out of it, or hardly anything. So that's that filled to the top again, and let's move on. You see it starting to come here. Now you can see there, that's pulling a lot of air out, but the Achilles heel with this is that we don't know how good the seal is of that piece of rubber on the valve there. So is it sucking air out of the system, or is it simply sucking air around that rubber? Now that's been sucking away for a while now, and it has taken the level down in here, so I'll just top that up. So that's that top back up again, but the burning question here is it pulling air out of the system, or is it just dragging the fluid through? So this end here now, it's, you know, that looks like it's pulling air through. And then if we look at the level in here, you can see that the level's up to there, so quite honestly it almost looks like it hasn't pulled any air out. That looks like the same volume of fluid that it's taken out of the master cylinder. So there we are, that's the vacuum bleeder. I put a line on there, that's the line of the fluid that's inside it. Well, to my mind, that just seems to be like the same amount of fluid I've just replaced out of the reservoir. So I'm not convinced that that has really pulled any air through. Let's move on. Next we're going to have a go at pressure bleeding. Now I'm not recommending this one or anything, it's simply the cheapest one I could find on eBay. I think it was £22. So in there you get this bottle. So you screw that onto the top of your reservoir, put fluid in here, and then you attach this end to your spare tyre, and that puts pressure into the system. So let's have a go at that. Now, you're not allowed to have more than 20 pounds of pressure in your tyre, so I'll have to let this down a bit. Right, that'll do. So there we are. And now what I've got to do, there's a little valve on the top of here, close that up, and then attach this end to the tyre. That'll pressurise the bottle up. You put fluid into the bottle, brake fluid up to that little line, and then attach this part here to the top of my brake fluid reservoir. So let's do that. There you go, that's working. Hear the air coming out of it. This is quite handy. There's a magnet on the bottom, so you can stick it to your bodywork. But ours is made of aluminium. Never mind. Whoops. Oh God. Right. Eventually. That there. The little valve doesn't close off properly on the top. Covered in it. Okay, let's turn up the pressure. It's open. I can see there's a bubble moving there, so that obviously is putting the pressure into it. Also leaking here somewhere. Leaking. Oh, there's a lot of pressure in there. Right, let's go the other end. Right. There's fluid dripping from somewhere. Let's see what happens when I turn this on. Oh, there it comes. Right, here comes fluid. No air. Yeah, it's definitely loose. What am I doing wrong? Right, I've got fluid pouring out of this side. Oh, blooming heck. Right, so there's definitely pressure in that system. I wonder if I pump the brake. Oh. Well, what can possibly go wrong? It's still hissing, it's pressurising it there, but there's nothing coming out at the wheel. Right, and this is what we're getting here. Nothing much. It's just dripping that much. No sign of any air. No, it's definitely loose enough there. Should only be half a turn's enough. Right, have a go at this. Right, I just had to stop there and top up the system again. And there's fluid coming out slowly, but no sign of any air. So really this side we've not seen any air come out of it. I'll leave it there for a while and run through, maybe something will come. Okay, that's been on there for quite a few minutes now. All I've had is about 10 tiny air bubbles have come out of it. So it's time to try something else. Right, just trying the pedal again here. And I wouldn't say it's any better. If anything, I think it's worse. Right, see if there's any air sort of trapped in this bit here. I'm just going to crack these nuts, pressurise it up and see if any air comes out. Well, doesn't seem to be anything coming out of there. Not even brake fluid. Right, brake fluid coming out of there now, so there's no air in that one. Let's try the back one. Okay, no air coming out of that one, just brake fluid. Right, so when we set the brakes up in the first place, we put the brake shoes on the lowest setting they will go. And this is to help push the piston in to here. So the piston, as you can see, if the piston is sat like that, this part here flush with the top, that one's down a little bit. The bottom of the piston chamber is there. So there is a good sort of 10 mil there that air could be trapped in a pocket here. So the more you can push that piston in, the less chance you've got of that air being trapped in there. So currently that one on with the brake shoe where it's set now is here, but if you look, it'll actually go another 4 or 5 millimeters down into there. So what I'm going to try and do now, open up the bleed screw there and then try and push this down any further and see if there is any air trapped in that bit. Okay. Alright, you can see that dripping now, so that's open. If I push this, does it move? Oh yes. Right, that's moved further down. Okay, and I might as well try the bottom one as well. That one doesn't seem to move. Right, fine. Right, so what I'm going to do now, lift the shoes out of the way, and then I'm going to turn these pistons sideways so that when the shoes are resting on them, they're pushing them in further. I'll sort of explain that. So there's the end of the brake shoe sits in that slot like that. So what I've done is I've turned that now sideways so that when the brake shoe sits on it, it sits on it like that, and it gains you those 4 or 5 millimeters there, pushes it further in. Alright, so I'll put a clamp across there now to hold that in position. And then I'll go around the other side and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so I've been around the other side, done that, squashed those in, and also I cracked the nut on the top of this cylinder, got a little bit of air out of that one and a little bit of air out of that side. So I'll go through the same process again with this one now. So the pressure is on. I'm just going to crack the highest of these 2 nuts, but not with that spanner. No sign of any air in that. Just crack the other one. Possibly a little bit of air. Right, so that's that. Okay, I'm going to have a go at these on the flexi hoses. No, that's just juice coming out of that one. Oops. No air there, just juice coming out of that one. Okay, now we're on it. We've got the pressure bleeder going up here. And we've got the vacuum bleeder going down here. Okay, we've got air coming out. Little tiny bubbles. And now I'm going to do the same on this side. Oh. Oh. Yeah, that's better, but it's still travelling. Okay, so where do we go now? Well, I've put about 1.5 litres into this system whilst I've been bleeding it, and I've got left over what's in there and what's in that pressure bottle there. So let's say 3/4 litre. So somehow 3/4 litre has gone into the system. So it must have expelled air to do that. The pedal's still soft. So the only thing I can think of now is the air is either trapped in that last bit of space in these, it's trapped in that safety valve, the brake safety valve, which is down there in the middle, or there's some left in the system towards the back. So what I'm going to do now is, using that belt and braces system, I'm going to start at the back and bleed the whole system through again, and let's see what happens. Right, that's one. And that's 2. And that's 3. Now this system of filling your air out of a tyre, I wouldn't try it on a classic Mini, because I think this is the 4th or 5th time I've had to fill this tyre up with air. And that's the last one. No. Still spongy. Back to the drawing board. Well, I'm out of ideas. Now at this point I get to take a break from brakes. My friend's turning this old rice horse trailer into a mobile coffee shop. But as you can see, it's got no mud guards on it. So he's brought it round for me to see if I can sort it out. That's a piece of vintage kit there. If you'd owned that in 1976, you'd have been top of the range. Well, I'm quite pleased with how that turned out. It's quite a tidy looking job in the end. Got look, trendy plastic bits. Right then, I'm back with renewed vitality. It's a new day and a new plan. It's stormy outside again. So do not adjust your sets. The background noise is coming from here, this shed rattling in the wind. So what's the plan? We've got a spongy brake pedal. So it could be down to a dodgy master cylinder, or more likely we've got air trapped in the system somewhere. So the most likely places for that air to be trapped would be in that safety valve down there, or in these slave cylinders at the front. Now, one of these slave cylinders is that way round, so that any air that's in there in this cylinder will actually self-bleed itself up through there, because the air goes to the highest point and the air will just come out of your bleed nipple. And that's the bottom one. But the top one is this way round. And when you look at the level there, so if we have air trapped in here and you look at the level of those bleed nipples, that air is above the bleed nipple. In normal circumstances you'd be able to force that out by pressing with the pedal, but the way these things are constructed inside makes that very difficult. So what's my plan anyway? The plan is I'm going to blank off the master cylinder to everything that goes to the back wheels. I'm then going to reconnect everything that comes to the front wheels directly to the front wheels, and in so doing I will cut out that safety valve. So we've now narrowed it down to it's either the master cylinder or it's these cylinders at the front. And I may even try and isolate one wheel separately on its own. Let's have a go at that. That's that end done. And that's that end done. Okay, here we go again. Right, let's have a look at what I've done here. This pipe here, although it's at the front, that works the back end of the system. I put a rubber bung in there and hopefully that has blocked that off. Then I've made a new bit of pipe here, and that is now going into the master cylinder, and that now goes directly down there through here and down to this side. So I've isolated this wheel completely. So all we're trying to bleed is this wheel. So I'm going to start, just let the air out of the bottom, and then I'll go and pump the pedal. Okay, let's go and try that. Okay, that's the old-fashioned way of doing it, and I've left the pedal pressed down with the weight. Let's see if we can get a pedal out. Right. There is air in that. And that would be okay. There's definitely this quarter of a pedal of travel there. So this is the latest thing I've noticed. That's definitely the sound of air in the master cylinder. Or is it the servo? Now I've got the bottom cylinder working here, you can see that moving, and I wondered if it was the bias of the G-cramp was stopping the top one working, so at this point I turn the clamp round and have a go at that. Opening the bleed valve here, see if there's any air has moved, and there's definite air in. I think it went in, not out. That was a big clue there, the air went in, not out. There's a little squirt of air there. And pump the pedal. Okay, I'm pumping there, nothing's moving at all. Right, I can hear squirting up here, but I can't tell where it's coming from. So here's a little trick. If you want to isolate a noise, get a piece of hose, put one end on your ear, and then search around with the other end, and you will find where that noise is actually coming from. I'm just going to try that. Sounds there. No. It's definitely here when I put it into the top, into the end, into the top of the pot. Just here. Sounds like squirting. Well, I've just noticed this. The bottom cylinder has popped out. So I better put that back together and have another go. What can possibly go wrong? Right, bled the master cylinder, and this is just sat here now, and air's coming out of it. Where is that coming from? Okay, I've left that now, sat there so the air can come out of it. It's taken about 5 minutes and the air has stopped coming out of it. So I'm going to go and press the pedal. Okay, I'm going to lock it off now. I've got the pedal is pressed down. I'm going to release the pedal and then go through the same process. Okay, I've pressed the pedals a few times and I've left the pedal up. That seemed to suck backwards, but no air has come out of it. This is now sucking the fluid back in. It started back here. This is open and the pedal is up, and it's sucking fluid back into somewhere. Now why would it take it from here and not from the top? Right then, I think I might have cracked it. I'm going to, the bleed nipple's open there, I'm going to give it a few pumps, close off the bleed nipple, and if I get a pedal, I think I know what to do. And off again. Fingers crossed. Oh, I've got a pedal. I've got a pedal. It's not the best in the world, but I've got one. Right then, what I'm going to do now, put all this back together and then go around, bleed the whole thing with that system, and if it works, I'll tell you how I did it. Wish me luck. Okay, so here I am, back one first. I'm lying down across the seats and I've got the door open, my foot on the brake pedal there. And I've got this system rigged up here. And just gently pressing, you can see the air coming out there. And I'm going to keep going until there's no sign of any air in that tube. And there isn't any at the minute. Here comes some more. So I'm pressing the pedal really slowly. I've pressed the pedal about 15 times now and I haven't seen any air for a while. Oh, saying that, there's one. And don't forget, when you press that pedal about 10 or 15 times, you need to come around and check the level of the fluid. That needs topping up. Okay, and here's the next wheel. I'm pressing the pedal down really slowly. You can see that fluid travelling up the pipe just there. There's air on the way. I'm releasing the brake slowly. You can see how it pulls it back. But my theory is that as long as there's fluid in that tube, that when it sucks back, it's only going to suck that fluid, not air. And that's it, there's no more air coming out of that one. There's the far wheel on the front. Air coming out of that. You can see the bubbles there. Right, the level's there. So slowly push the pedal down. 3/4 of the way only, and then release it slowly, and you can see the level going back down. But then when you don't, not touching anything now, that level starts to come back up again. Right, well that was the last one. Fingers crossed, will I be smiling? Hardening up. I think we've got a pedal there. Something I can use anyway. So what I'm going to do now is take the clamps off and then turn the tops of those pistons back into the proper position so that the brake shoes sit in them in their normal position. I'm going to put the clamp back on and I'm going to try it again. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to put the hubs and the wheels back on and I'm going to take it for a road test. for those of you who are wishing me luck. Look at that, a lucky rainbow. Trouble with lucky rainbows is you only get them when it's raining. Not good for an open top car. Okay, so when I first took it outside and slamming the brakes on the grass, there was a little bit of imbalance, and that back wheel there was being the first one to lock up. Anyway, I did a few of those up and down the field, and then I took it out onto the road, onto the tarmac, which it was dry when I took it out, and there is no doubt at all it stops. It stops really quickly. It's not pulling severely anywhere, but when I slammed on and skidded, it sounded like all four wheels had locked up, and it turned a tiny little bit to the left, but that's it. But I think at that standard now, then it's ready for MOT. Take it to the MOT and they'll tell us this one's too sharp, that one's not sharp enough, and I can fiddle with it there and then. But to my mind now, these brakes are absolutely fine. I started off the video with an array of stuff on this bonnet, and it's taken me about 20 hours of fiddling to come down to what you need to bleed this Land Rover is a rubber tube, a bleed nipple and a frying pan. Right, and in that time what I discovered was that the master cylinder sets up a massive vacuum, and it doesn't matter if you leave the pedal pushed down or the pedal left up, and in fact in the end I left the pedal in the upward position. So now I'll go through the things that we tried one by one. We'll start off with this was the simple system of attach a tube to your bleed nipple, which then went down into a clean receptacle, a jar or a jug that had some fluid in the bottom of it, and the bottom of the pipe is sat in the fluid. So when you press the pedal, stop pressing the pedal, and then it wants to suck backwards, it can only suck that fluid up from the bottom of the jug. The trouble is that because this is hanging downwards, you've usually got air in here anyway, so the first thing it sucks back is air. Even if you've got a really good seal from the tube onto the bleed nipple, because you've got the bleed nipple open, it can still suck air in back through the bleed nipple. So that's number one, that's why that didn't work. The second thing is this, right, £2.55 from Halford's non-return valve, and the same thing goes here. Although it will not allow the air to be sucked back in through that non-return valve, the air is still getting sucked back in at this other end. Now this, I don't know whether I did it wrong, but this piece of plastic is supposed to make a perfect seal onto the bleed nipple. But again, there's a really strong vacuum coming from that master cylinder, and it can still suck air in around the actual bleed nipple itself. Next up is the vacuum bleeder. Well, you saw that. I left it there for minutes and it was just sucking air through it all the time, and the fluid was just building up in here. Now, even if you left that running, got out and then closed the bleed nipple whilst it was still running, I think that the vacuum that is built up in that master cylinder is so strong that this is not pulling that air out at all. The air is just sat there and it's just bringing the fluid. So when you close off the bleed nipple, then all you're doing is trapping the air inside it. So that one didn't work. Now we're on the pressure bleeder. Well, this worked great, except that although it was got full pressure up here in the reservoir in the master cylinder, it didn't seem to be pushing that pressure through down to the bleed nipple. So that wasn't working either. Then, because I'm the kind of guy I am, I used this, and I used this at the same time, and I pressed the brake pedal, and I still couldn't get a pedal. So if I was doing a review, what would I think of all those contraptions? Well, there's nothing wrong with any of them. They would all work perfectly on a different system to this one. And there's only one thing I didn't try, and that was actually using the pressure bleeder to reverse bleed the system. I didn't do that because I didn't get to that point. I actually managed to bleed the system and figured out how to do it. So what have we got here? This is a piece of silicone tubing with a 5mm inside diameter. and I've got a bleed nipple on the end of it. And the bleed nipple basically is just to give it weight and hold it in there. Because what you want to do with this pan that's all receptacle that's got liquid in it, you want to get that as high up as you can. I've got 1 metre of pipe here, but you'd be better off with 1.5 meters. So you attach this end down there to the bleed nipple and open the bleed nipple. You then go around to your brake pedal and you press it down slowly. So you're going to take 7 to 10 seconds to push it down. And then you'll be able to observe what's going on in the tube. Watch for the air coming up. And then when you depress the pedal, and of course you can only go 3/4 of the way down with this system. When you let the pedal back up, you do the same again. Take at least 5 seconds to slowly let that pedal come up. And then you'll be able to see that your fluid that has come up to here by now, when you lift that pedal, you'll see it go back down. You do it slowly because you don't want to introduce any air being sucked round the side of that bleed nipple down there. And then you continue to do that each time. Now the instructions in the manual say that you should leave 5 seconds between each of those cycles. And that's because the fluid that's in the reservoir in the master cylinder takes about 5 seconds to run from the top of the reservoir down into the master cylinder itself. And that somehow is part of the problem that is being created. So it can't suck that fluid in from the top. So what it's doing is it's sucking back in from the bottom. And that's what's created our problem. Now let's have a look at some of the issues that came up in the comments. The first one was that these cylinders should be at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. In that position, there is an equal chance that air can get trapped in this one and this one. Now what we've got is ours are like this. So what we gain here is with the bleed nipple on this one, that one will self-bleed. So there's no chance of air getting caught in there. But this one, this way up, because of the height of that, we could get air trapped behind the cylinder. And that's why we push the cylinder right in to negate that possibility. So I'd say that this system does have a tiny advantage over them being like that. Next suggestion was to reroute. Now the fluid comes in here, goes out of there to this one, and then it's bled from here. And the suggestion is to change that so that your fluid comes into here, out of there, to this one, and then the bleed nipple on the top. And as far as physics is concerned, with the bleed nipple at the top, air rises through the liquid. So I think there's a slight advantage in that, but if I don't have to change it, I'm not going to. Now, jacking up the vehicle to get things to happen and leaving it overnight. Well, if your cylinders are in this position and you look at where the holes are, so if you're at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, if you jacked up one side of the vehicle, that would help to tip the air up to there to get the air to come out through the connection holes. You would then have to jack it up in the opposite direction to let the air out of this one. I don't see any advantage here for tipping the vehicle up at the front or anything like that. Now, if you are going to leave that open and clamp up the brake shoes to really squash them down, which I don't think is necessary. Not everyone's got a G-clamp like this, but you could use good strong cable ties to give you the same effect if you just want to leave it open so you can see what's going on, because you're not pressing the pedal that hard anyway, and they'll work perfectly. So there you go. Those were my findings and that was my solution. If you decide to give it a go, leave me a message in the comments and let me know how you got on. And if you're looking for more landy fun on YouTube, then there's a fella called Max Power. He's in Ireland and he's just starting a Land Rover Series 3 project now. As far as I'm concerned, I think the next video I do is going to be me, at last and finally, taking this vehicle for an MOT. So until then, thanks for watching. See you next time.